Okay, to talk about climate justice from a perspective from the global south or from the countries in the south, it's important to first try to look at the climate crisis, and then the climate justice will be the response from the peoples to this climate crisis. So how do we see the climate crisis? It's generated by an economic model, a production model, consumption and distribution model. That's the thing. That's what is behind this climate crisis. And we need to see that all the changes that we are seeing in the environment, in the climate, all these so-called environmental disasters are related to the human activity. So through the greenhouse emissions, we are generating these changes in the environment. That's what we call the climate crisis. And it's not only in terms of the emissions, but in we are talking about all the changes that we are generating in the planet. And that affects the territories and that affects the communities. But then it has into the global system, it has like a more bigger impact that we are seeing through these environmental or climate extreme events like hurricanes and typhoons and those things that we are seeing more and more on news. So even when before people were denying that this climate crisis was happening, now we see that it is happening. And what we see is that the most affected people by those so-called extreme events are the poorest people in the south. And why is that? According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the countries in the south are more vulnerable because of their location, but also because of the political and economic conditions to confront this situation. So it's not only a geographical thing, but the cause why they are more vulnerable is also related to the economic and political situation of those countries. So then what should we do to solve that? And that's when the climate justice discussion comes. Because we say all this destruction has been caused by human activity, but this human activity relates to the production. So how do we see this? It's emission of greenhouse gases produced by fossil fuel burning, by industrial production, by the agro-industry production, all those areas, the transportation. Those are the sectors that we can relate to the causes of this climate crisis, these emissions. And who have been using them, or why is this produced to fulfill the needs of the consumption in the north. However, where were those fossil fuels? Where are those energy sources now? In the south. So the point here is that the extraction of the resources is happening in the south, and it is affecting communities in the south. The country where I come from, Colombia, it has one of the biggest coal mines in the world, open pit coal mine. And the communities around this area where the mine is based, they have been displaced. The territory has been destroyed, polluted. The water sources are disappearing or are dried or are polluted as well. People, they don't have anywhere else to go, and they are suffering now from diseases. They don't have the possibility of continue hunting or doing their traditional activities or growing. It's just now the territory is not possible to live in, and this is to satisfy the energy needs from the north. That's why we say this is not just. This is not an economic just model. But this is causing at the same time the climate crisis. This extraction of fossil fuels is causing the climate crisis. So we have been seeing this for years. The scientists saw this 20 years or 30 years ago, and then the UN created a body to address this climate crisis and to say, how can we now solve this crisis? And it's called the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. So at this space, for 20 years, governments have been discussing what should we do to stop the crisis. One of the things was the non-Kyoto Protocol. And the Kyoto Protocol was saying we need to cut carbon emissions in the coming years and come back to a previous level when it is not risky for the humanity. However, within this body, some countries, and this is when the problem becomes geopolitical, the northern countries, mainly pressed by the corporations, they started to see that these cutting emissions will mean to change the production model, and it's not possible. So they created what we call false solutions to the crisis. It's called in the language of the UNFCCC the flexibilization mechanism for this reduction of emissions, and they are basically market mechanisms. One of the main market mechanisms relates to the European Union emission trading system, and coming from there, it was proposed to have the clean development mechanism. So what is that? All those technical things. What do we mean for that, and how is this impacting people, and how this relates to what we say climate injustice? So the northern countries have, according to the Kyoto Protocol, they have to reduce their emissions. They have like allowances of emissions. And it became reality in the European Union to this ETS, the European Union Emission Trading Systems, but they can exchange. So if Germany emits more and Poland doesn't, then Poland can sell the extra emissions permit to Germany. That's one option. That's the north-north option. The other option, and this is when the clean development mechanism comes in, is okay, you can reduce your emissions in the south. And this is you can create a project that will produce another kind of energy and will reduce your emissions in the south, while you continue emitting in the north. So what is happening in the last years is that there is a lot of money to create those projects in the south. And let's see one example, one emblematic example of these CDM projects. It's the dams. Dams are presented as a clean energy model. And so what they do is they come, and normally who are they? Corporations again. So corporations come to the south and create a big dam, which will produce again enough energy, which at the same time is used to be exported or to extract energy in those same countries, or extract fossil fuels or raw materials. Anyway, so they come and they build these dams, but at the same time they are displacing communities. They are creating a big environmental damage in the regions where they are building these dams. and communities again don't have the space to continue living. So the impact is again the same. Is destroying territories, is destroying the relation between the community and the land, is destroying the possibility of having their own agriculture, while they say that they are just exchanging emissions. Plus, some studies show that the dams produce additional greenhouse gas emissions. So the outcome at the end is territorial destruction of communities, displacement. In many cases, since communities resist, then you see violence and you see criminalization and you see murders in some of those cases, unfortunately many of them. So we are seeing all this, and we are not seeing any reduction or any clear reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions. So at the end, what we see is this is not to solve the climate crisis. That's why we say this is false solution. This is addressing something else. And what it's addressing is to produce new profits and benefits for those corporations. And at the same time, they don't have to reduce or change their actions in the north. So all of this is what is causing the climate injustice. That's what we say. But as I was saying before, the communities resist. So the communities resist to these projects. The communities resist to the extraction in their own territories. And why? Because they have a strong relationship with the land. That's why we are talking about territory. It means social and political relation with the land, with the water, and with the community itself. So that is another way to address the climate and environmental crisis, deepening this relation from the communities with the territory. And that's when we say, okay, this is our solution, this is the real solution to the climate crisis. Instead of deepening this other model that tries to keep the same consumption and production patterns, we say we need to change this. So communities, by resisting and keeping their space in the territory, the relationship in harmony with the territory, they are not only finding a space for themselves, but they are also offering a real solution. So movements in the south mainly, but in a dialogue with the movements in the north, let's say global movements, are proposing ideas like food sovereignty, energy sovereignty, buen vivir, coming from Latin America, from the Andean countries, and from other regions. There are other ways to call the same idea of harmony between nature and human beings. But the point is, if we think on a production model that don't need to improve more and more, when the indigenous people say, we don't need welfare, we don't need more, we need to be good, to live good. That's what we say buen vivir or summa causae in the own language. And it means we don't need to consume more and more. We don't need to produce more and more. We have enough to live okay, to live good, live well. And that means a change in the mentality. And that is what comes to the real solution. But of course, this is a long way to that. So using concepts, as I was saying, food sovereignty, which means each country or each region or at the local level, we can produce what we need to eat. We don't need to import from anywhere, but at the same time we are strengthening our traditions in the way of producing and in the way of cooking. So it's traditional way of also developing our own way of eating. Food is a relationship itself. So food sovereignty in that way goes beyond this idea of just having food for everyone or feeding the world. It's also how can we strengthen at the local level and avoiding this transportation and all these unequal relations through the community. And then peasants' movements say the agroecology cools the planet. So that's a real solution, and there are numbers that prove that through agroecology you can provide food for everyone at local level, and at the same time you are reducing emissions. So those community-based solutions are more and more providing a real solution for the climate crisis. Of course, we need to keep resisting to the existing projects. That's needed, and in this way resisting is as well as a solution. Resisting is a solution, but at the same time, through resisting, communities are developing alternatives, and that is one of the main points and what is one of the main things that people are doing in the South. Yes, that's one side, but to come up to what I was saying before, this needs a correlation with the political decisions, and that's when movements from the South and from the North come together to make some pressure to the governments to demand real solutions. Stop developing all these solutions that affect people, that create more and more social and environmental conflicts, and instead of that start to really think on how to change this production model, this extraction model, and at the end, of course, the consumption model. So in this way, the joint effort from North and South, from peoples in North and South, can address the climate justice.